Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 2. Today, we're going to present our group assignment, which is the topic title is Action Taken by the Government to Solve the Problem of Inflation in Malaysia by using Fiscal and Monetary Policy. So, we're going to start with introduction. Malaysia inflation climbed by 4% in November 2022 compared to the same month the previous year. On a monthly basis, the inflation in November 2022 recorded 0.3% as compared to 0.2% in October 2022. Wilayah Persekutuan Putrajaya 7.9%, Selangor 4.8%, Sarawak 4.7%, and Johor 4.2% were the four states that saw rise in November 2022 that were higher than the national inflation rate of 4%. The lowest rise, 2.4%, was recorded by Wilayah Persekutuan Labuan. Malaysia's inflation rate was lower than those of a few other nations, including the Eurozone 10%, the US 7.1%, the Philippines 8%, Thailand 5.6%, Indonesia 5.4%, and Republic of Korea 5%.
The next one is summary of macroeconomic issue. What is inflation? Inflation is defined as a persistent and sustained increase in the aggregate of average price level of goods and services in an economy. There is an increase in the cost of living that causes lower purchasing power. It shows where there is too much money chasing too few goods. When inflation is high, the value of money will be lower, and vice versa. Next is cost of inflation in Malaysia. The demand for goods and services in the market increased dramatically, which could not be accommodated by the supply and offered by the seller at that time. In the end, the seller had no choice and had to raise the price of goods and services charged to meet their high demand among their customers. Cost of operation, production, distribution also increased. Labor costs are rising. The cost of raw material also increased, and the war between Ukraine and Russia is causing much of the world food supply to take a long and difficult process to meet worldwide demand at this point. So when this all happen indirectly, it will cause the price to increase and increase the spending of people in Malaysia. After that, inflation rate in Malaysia. Malaysia annual inflation rate was at 4% in November 2022, unchanged from November for month low figure and compared with market estimate of 3.9%. Inflation was stable for clothing at 0.4%, while cost if for both housing is 1.4% versus 1.5% in October. Transport 5% versus 5.2%, and furnishing and household maintenance is 3.8% versus 4.1%. Meantime, price accelerate for help is 1.0 versus 1%. Restaurant and hotel is 7% versus 6.8%. Recreation 3.6% versus 3.4%. And miscellaneous goods and service 2.6% versus 2.4%. The graph shows the inflation rate in Malaysia. Starting January, inflation started with 3.2% and went down by 2.3% and so on. But in April, it increased again and continued to increase until July with 4.7%. In October, the inflation rate appears to be stable at 4%. Next, what happens if inflation have in Malaysia? It has two effects, which is positive and negative. For positive effect, encourage more people to save in the bank rather than spend. As for debtors, they get a profit because the low interest rate does not change because the real debt that needs to be repaid has decreased. For negative effect, increase the cost of living and reduce the standard of welfare of the community. For those who have a fixed income and pension recipients, their cost of living becomes higher, thus burdening their level of welfare. Lower the value of the country currency and cause short-term capital flow abroad.
The first one in the fiscal policy is about contractionary fiscal policy. In Malaysia, contractionary fiscal policy aims to reduce money supply during inflation. Government needs to delay all spending for development purposes and increase taxes. The first one in the point is use of government spending taxation and transfer payment to shrink the economy outputs. The second one is in order to remove the inflationary gap, Malaysia government need to reduce spending and increase tax. The third one is it lowers unemployment to below the natural rate of unemployment. Employers struggle to find enough workers to meet market demand that slow growth the production side. From what I get from the internet, the example is in terms of Malaysia fiscal position, the government has revised the deficit target from 5.4% to 6% of GDP for 2021, having factors in continuing measure from 2020 economic stimulus package, as well as the PERMAI and PERMAKASA packages launched in the first quarter of this year. After that, in this fiscal policy, there is also about expansionary fiscal policy. I want to tell about what Malaysia do in about for expansionary fiscal policy. When Malaysian economy is in recession or depression, the expansionary fiscal policy will be used to stimulate activities. Expansionary fiscal policy is when the government expand the money supply in the economy using budgetary tools to either increase spending or cut taxes, both of which provide consumers and business with more money to spend. The first one in the point, Malaysian government will increase their spending, which will directly increase aggregate demand to close this gap, since government spending creates demand for goods and services. From the internet, what I have searched and what I get, the Malaysian have proposed and budget in 2023 about expansionary policy. The Malaysian government has proposed an expansionary fiscal policy which budget 2023 having a total allocation of uh, 373.3 billion ringgit Malaysia as compared to R- RM 385.3 billion ringgit Malaysia in 2022. This was done with the aim of balancing the interests of the rakyat with sustaining economic growth under the assumption of more challenging year ahead due to weaker global economic prospects amid political tension and fiscal limitation.
Next one is contractionary monetary policy. The central bank can reduce the money supply through different monetary instruments like using open market operation, raising the required reserve ratio, and calling on special deposit. This measure will reduce money creation, consumption, and investment, so the aggregate demand will fall, hence it will cause a decrease in price. So, what the meaning by open market operation, rising required reserve ratio, and call of special deposit? The meaning by open market operation is the Central Bank of Malaysia sell government security, short-term bond in the open market to the public to reduce bank deposit and credit creation of commercial bank. Second one is rising required reserve ratio. In the event inflation happen in Malaysia, the Central Bank of Malaysia will increase the required reserve ratio of all commercial bank to reduce the ability of commercial bank to provide loan. Third one is call of special deposit. During inflation, commercial bank are sometimes required to deposit an additional percentage of their deposit in the central bank. After that, expansionary monetary policy. In Malaysia, expansionary monetary policy is a government policy on money supply and credit creation, aimed at achieving higher economic growth, stability in price, and full employment. Especially monetary policy aims to increase money supply and also to control unemployment during recession. Since the beginning of turmoil in the financial market in Malaysia in July 1997, monetary policy has been progressively tightened to a combination of interest rate policy, prudential measure, and quantitative restriction. While the above policy measures have been effective in slowing down growth of credit and money supply, some inefficiencies have emerged in the intermediation process as well as in the function of the money market. In this situation, Bank Negara Malaysia (BNM) find it necessary to introduce additional monetary measures to meet the following objectives, like maintain tight monetary policy, interest rate structure will be streamlined, and reduce the statutory reserve requirement (SRR). Then quantitative monetary policy. First one is discount rate. This refers to interest rate that the central bank charge on the loan or reserve to bank. For example, BNM Bank Negara Malaysia increase its bank rate on borrowing become more expensive, and this will lead to a decrease in demand for loan. Second one is funding. This refers to the conversion of short-term loan to long-term loan. The objective is to lengthen the payment of the principal sum so that the bank cannot create multiple credit.
Then there is a qualitative monetary policy in this instrument. The first one in this qualitative monetary policy is a selective credit control. When inflation happens to avoid non-performing loans, Bank Negara Malaysia, uh, named by BNM, persuade commercial banks to be more selective in giving out loans. Bank Negara Malaysia has the power to correct the advance and deposit of commercial banks and to determine the maximum allowable maturity for loans. The second one is about the special directive. Bank Negara Malaysia influenced commercial banks to restrict their lending policy, such as non-need collateral security or guarantees, which will lead to decrease in the demand for loans. Finally, about the conclusion in this topic. At the end of this topic, we get a lot of information about this. The first one is about summary of macroeconomic issue. In that, we explain about inflation meaning, causes on inflation rate in Malaysia, and what happened if inflation happened in Malaysia. After that, we'll tell about discussion based on macroeconomic theories. We show about fiscal policy and monetary policy. Each of that, we explain about using of contractionary and expansionary policy. I hope that inflation doesn't happen again in our country because it causes bad consequences to our country. And I also hope that our economy in our country continue to be grow bigger and more bigger for Malaysia people comfortable. I suggest that government need to always follow economics activities so Malaysia not left behind. So that's all from our group. Um, I hope you can understand about what we explain about this topic. So thank you. Bye bye.